Welcome to another edition of the Never Quit podcast, hosted and sponsored by Quotes Jungle. In this episode, I will talk to you about one of the most challenging times in my life where I wanted to quit and I'm glad I didn't quit. Hiking and submitting Pike's Peak. I just overcame a very tragic moment in my life in recovering from an Achilles tendon rupture injury on my left side. Needing to challenge myself like I've been most of my life, I came up with this idea that I wanted to hike and submit a big mountain. So I talked to my client, Damien, yes, the same client that I ruptured my Achilles tendon with. He essentially came to me from the beginning for training to get stronger, to conquer stuff like this because he felt he wasn't very strong, muscular-wise, mainly in the legs. Over time, I helped him accomplish that. Speeding up to now me, a friend of mine's named Quincy, also named DJ Q, he had a group of people who said they were going to attempt to hike Pike's Peak and submit it. I talked to Damien. I remember him giving me this list of everything that I needed, so I rushed to REI, spent all this money, and had all this gear. So it was something that I had to do. It got closer to the time and the meet and the date where we were supposed to hike and do Pike's Peak. So I asked Damien when he came in for one of his sessions, hey, would you mind, do you want to do this in a couple of days? He looked at me and said, yeah, with a shocking face. Before you know it, a couple of days, we're at the start of Pike's Peak. I was really excited and happy that I was doing this because I was a city kid who was not used to going outdoors and exploring nature and mainly hiking or even doing something to attempt to do something this extreme. I mainly wanted to challenge myself to see if I could do something this long without feeling pain in my leg after all the recovery and strength training and everything that I've done. So this is why I was attempting to do this with Damien. Plus, I personally, as a selfish reason, wanted to see if he was strong enough and he could submit it as well. We'll get back to that later. Let's rewind a little bit before I get to wanting to submit this hike of Pike's Peak. I'm at the tail end of the recovery from my Achilles tendon and I have a doctor's appointment to get released. I'm guaranteed that I'm going to be released for activity, right? So guaranteed and convinced in myself that I had all my things packed in the truck, meaning a bike kit, etc., all the good stuff. I get released. The doctor says to me, Mr. Jones, whatever you do, please don't go on the road or do something crazy. Please stay safe. Stay on the trail. I obeyed the doctor's orders and went on Coal Creek Trail in Boulder, Colorado. Everything's going fine. I'm reminding myself, feeling the air, feeling nature, feeling the trail, hearing the gravel, hearing everything as I'm on this trail. I'm about 8 to 9 miles in. Like most cyclists, we always look ahead, not behind us. I see a little kid with his mother, and we're both approaching this tunnel. Can't be a good thing, right? In my head, I see the mother with her head down and the kid kind of on a bike swaying from left to right. Before you know it, we're facing each other and we're playing chicken left, right, left, right. He goes left, I go right. He's going back and forth with me. I do a hard swing to the right and make sure that I go right. Guess what? He goes right with me. I dodged him, end up slamming into the ground because me being a football player and being aware that's a shoulder that I usually drop. But I dropped it into some cement under a tunnel. I thought to myself that was the best move because I could just see a quick flash before my eyes, this kid paralyzing in the hospital. I'm 200 pounds plus, he's 45 pounds tops. Keep in mind, his mother sees none of this happen. She had her head down in her phone, so she didn't even see it or hear it. She actually did an AI step over me for those who know sports, if you don't Google it, and did a full step over my body while looking down at her phone. It wasn't till a few yards later that her son said, Mom, look. She turned and looked and saw me on the ground and said, oh, he's strong. He looks like he'll be okay. Keep in mind, I have a broken collarbone. I'm not bitter about that. I just feel like people who are on their phone should pay closer attention to stuff. I'm just really glad that that kid's safe because me doing a collision with him, he guaranteed would have been in the hospital. Moving back to the hike. I convinced myself, I convinced Damien, I got all the gear. I got a North Face jacket on. It's red, I'm all swagged out. I got the brown brim hat to block all this. I got all the layers on. I'm ready to go. we get a room or something the night before so we could try to submit it early because it's a time thing, but it wasn't for us. It was more so a mental check or something for me to know physically my body was back intact and that I trained him to be a strong individual, like I said before, selfishly. We get on the hike, everything's going good. We're taking pictures. Everything feels good. I'm in layers. Actually, the ranger checked on us a couple times. He was really worried about the layers that I was in. Damien even shared with me later as we laughed about it. He said, hey man, the ranger kept coming up to me saying, is your friend going to be okay? Isn't he going to get hot? Because I'm the type of person, I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate to this. When people tell me to layer up because I'm going to be cold, I usually stay in those layers and then I get so sweaty because I sweat and I don't want to take them off and be cold. So I stayed in my layers so I could stay warm. And what was best for me, it worked. Moving along during this hike, I remember having several conversations with myself. This is why I really recommend something like this to people who've never done it before. Like I said, I wasn't an avid hiker. I wasn't somebody who was very familiar with the outdoors or even doing outdoor activities. I was a city kid who was really spoiled. Spent a lot of time in vehicles, so I didn't do a lot of hiking and camping. With all due respect, I wasn't a Boy Scout. Doing this hike, I was really glad that I did it because it did a mental check for me and something that I'd never experienced in my whole life thus far. I remember we're on the hike and I was having several conversations with myself. I felt like I was in some kind of therapy session. It was very therapeutic for me, mental-wise, and clearly I was strong enough because it was never a pain thing. It was my body's going to stop moving and I had to overcome that mentally. I remember we got to a point where we said, and we had this rule, 1 foot in front of the other, which simply meant what it says. That's what helped me get through this whole thing. I remember stopping a whole bunch of times thinking I was having conversations with Damien, and I wasn't having conversations with him. At times I was talking to myself, and I definitely felt like I was going to hallucinate. Several times. I thought about quitting and turning around and saying, hey, at least I tried it, but my body wasn't quitting on me. So I wasn't going to quit. We're hiking up this, you could do the math. We're at a halfway point or some kind of point where they say you can rest and decide to turn around. We sat there for about 5 minutes and I said, man, we got to stay moving because I'll cramp up and I'll want to leave and not do this. So we continued. More conversations with myself, taking in the view, seeing all the beautiful things. I highly recommend this to people. It really challenged me and that's why I kept going. I knew that I couldn't quit on myself. So I kept taking step after step after step after step. And keep in mind, I'm in layers because I'm not familiar with how cold I'm going to get. I see Damien starting to take off jackets and do all this kind of stuff. And I said, I can't do that because I'll sweat too much. Even one time, like I told you, we had the ranger stop and ask him, is your friend going to be okay? Because I was in so many layers. Keep in mind what I forgot to add. I did also have a backpack on me. I had a Mountain Dew in there because I'm addicted to sugar and caffeine. That kept me through. Damien was shaking his head at me like, why do you have that in there? Also had something else in there and I'll bring that up later. So we're going along and we're on the hike. I remember it's getting hard. My legs are giving out. It quivered. I literally wanted to quit over 40 times, but I told myself I could never quit that and live with myself and think that I was strong enough to be somewhere stranded. It took me to a lot of places and had me thinking about a lot of stuff that people have overcome, opportunities that we have in this nation to do things outdoors that are therapeutic like that. Yes, it cost me money to get all the gear to do this. Back to what it did for me mentally. It just kept me going and reminded me that in your darkest times, even when you're alone, the human mind is very powerful and very strong. I thought, man, if I turn around, one, it was going to take me longer to get back. By myself because I don't think Damien was turning around with me. So we're playing this both ego role of I'm not going to tap, he's not going to tap, which brings me up to another story that I remember. At this time, I don't remember where we're at in the hike, but we're over the halfway point. I turn and I look at Damien and I said, man, I'm glad we're doing this. Did you feel this way when you did it ever before? He turns and grins at me and says, man, I've never submitted this before or did one this long. My brain explodes. Oh man, I don't know if we're going to do this because he doesn't know what it feels like. So I thought, About 5 minutes later, Damien had told me that I had just stopped and I was just staring at the sky. So that can kind of tell you the kind of stuff that I was going through, because Damien was actually waiting on me and I thought I was waiting on him, telling him a story. We finally make it up to the top. I learned this later after doing research, because I did no research before. I just wanted to submit it and think to myself that I was more powerful enough, or both of my legs were functioning at the time. When you're higher up, weather comes faster. So like I said before, I had not done any kind of research and realized that most of the time it's snowstorms or hails at a certain point. We get too close to the top and we're all in for shelter. And I remember the snowballs just hitting me like I was in a snowball fight and I couldn't throw a snowball back. It also deeply took me into an experience that I've been in my life that I will share eventually on this Never Quit podcast as well, where people were taking advantage of me and hitting me and I couldn't hit back. That's the best way that I'll explain it. So mentally, that was something deep for me because it took me to that place that fast. But keep in mind, this is just nature hitting me with snowballs. It was stuff that was the size of baseballs. They were pretty big. Well, I'm exaggerating, half the size of a baseball, but over the size of a golf ball. 20 to about 30 welts before we could find shelter because we're hiking up in this rivet. And then we finally make it to the top. I remember making it to the top and feeling like such a relief. And what I did is I finally reached in my backpack. Damien didn't even know this. For those of you who know, I'm a DJ who loves vinyl records. My vinyl collection is over 10,000 pieces and I have maybe 2,000 to 3,000 donuts. A donut in hip hop terms or in record terms is a 7-inch record that was played in jukeboxes back in the day before it became to bigger records like a 33. So I brought a donut record in my backpack and also packed a record player in the back, which is a Big Bird record player. I told myself if I made it to the top, I was going to surprise Damien and play it to the universe and play a record. Well, I made it to the top. So I broke out the record player, and a couple people who had submitted behind us were kind of thinking I had too much gear on me, and they understood why I had that backpack on. I broke out the Big Bird player, and guess what record I played? Dianna Ross, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. It was the best and rewarding feeling that I ever felt in my life. I felt like I had accomplished something, that I had never quit on myself or had to challenge myself to never quit. Even my surgery just felt like I had so much support and I knew there was a healing time. But this time I was out there by myself in the universe. Well, Damien was alongside of me, but mentally and physically to submit and do that myself without tapping. Knowing I had the record player in my back with the donut 7-inch record player. And they call those donuts for a reason because they're 7 inches and they also play at 45 RPMs, meaning rounds per minute. So it plays really fast. So I play this record. Me and Damien look at each other and we start crying and we hug because we both know that we've overcome something. I'd helped him submit, I believe to this day, his biggest 14er. I'm glad he took me and we did that together and we didn't quit on ourselves. I'm saying all this to say that you should never quit on yourself, and even something so challenging that makes you want to tap or makes you feel like you can't do it, you can do it. Like I said before, I wasn't a person who was very aware of the outdoors or doing stuff like that, even though it seems so simple. I lived in Colorado. I was mostly an athlete that did indoor stuff, or minus football and track and field that's outdoors, that I wasn't exploring the outdoors. I really feel that there was a connection with me and the universe and me trying to prove to myself that I was strong enough to accomplish something like that. I'm glad I did it. That single-handedly is the time that I can remember in my life where I wanted to quit the most thus far. I've been through a lot of things in my life, and that one hike submitting Pike's Peak at 14,115 feet was definitely a challenge for me, and I definitely wanted to quit and never quit. I understand why a lot of people do what people would consider or think is a extreme act, or jump into a sport or a competition that they did for a loved one or in memory for. When I was on that hike, that reminded me how it's so easy for people to do that once they do a mental check and they never give up on their self. Example, let's say you had an auntie who was a marathon runner and you never ran your whole life because you hate running, your knees still hurt from high school or that one time you did squats. Well, in dedication and in memory of her, you sign up for a race and you find out you're a savage in it. You may have been a good runner your whole life, or maybe was in high school or growing up and did sports. But the mind is so powerful when you never give up and quit on yourself that you can do anything. Another example is when I first started cycling, I would see a lot of people in gear, meaning in gear, spandex, matching shoes, all that. And I'd always see a couple people, mainly females now that I think about it, who would be in jean shorts or just regular shorts and flip-flops doing 100-mile bike rides. But it reminded me of this hike. So I challenge you all to do something like that will challenge yourself to never give up on yourself, because then you can channel that into other things in your life and it goes a long way. I've never been an outdoors person. I really love the outdoors. Now I spend most of the time on the bike when I'm outdoors, unless it's too cold and I'm indoors. But I highly recommend people finding themselves through a hike, even if it's just walking. You don't have to do something as extreme as I did and try to submit Pike's Peak or have a goal. And there's lots of people who do that for a living, and I have a utmost respect for them knowing just doing that one attempt. Have I did another one before? No. Do I plan on? Yes. I think it's an anniversary time for me to do another one to challenge myself just mentally and see that I can do it. Never give up on yourself. The human mind is so powerful. This is just one story that I use, that I channel, that I want to share with you, so that if I'm referencing in stories and I say Pike's Peak, that's a channel or a switch for me to remind me how I overcame lots of situations. I hope you've enjoyed your time in this short, brief story. This has been a Never Quit story, sponsored by Quotes Jungle and hosted with your host, Quote. I appreciate everybody's support. More to come. I have lots of videos and stories in the archives. More like this, more with guests. Continue to watch and subscribe and listen. I appreciate your time. Never quit on yourself. Peace.